So, this is gonna be a train wreck. I was supposed to record this earlier on in the day, and my stupid idiot brain said, you know what? No, let's not do that. Let's wait until literally midnight. So, it is currently the 1st of April, and I have an assignment to do for a class this semester. I have to do a story remix where I have to read or reread a story and basically like remix a story. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to reread a book that I read for the first time when I was 13 or 14. Now, as a 19-year-old, I'm going to read it, reread it, and I'm going to see what I think of it. So I decided to go with another book that I read a few years ago, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I actually don't know how to pronounce his last name. I read this book for the first time when I was 13 or 14. I can't remember exactly. It was either the summer of 2014 or the summer of 2015. I don't really know. All I know is it was a long time ago. And the thing is, this book is less than 200 pages, and I can really tell because I read this book in a car ride going, I think I was going to the beach or something with my mom and my niece, and I remember nothing. I remember literally nothing about this book. The only thing I remember is one specific scene at some point in the book. The main character, Charlie, gets, I think her name is Sam. He gets Sam as a Secret Santa for like a certain year, whatever year this book takes place in, or maybe earlier than that, I don't really know. But again, you can definitely tell I can't remember anything. But he gets her for Secret Santa, and he decides to get her a cassette tape or a record, or he makes her like a mixtape. I don't really know. But he makes her that. And the thing about Secret Santa is it's supposed to be a thing where like people are trying to guess who it is, but everyone knew that like it was him because he's the only person who would do something like that for Secret Santa. And that's literally all I remember about this book. I don't remember anything that happens in it. I only remember those two characters' names because they're like the two main characters and because I flipped through the book earlier today. So I have not reread it yet, so I can't really like give my thoughts, but when I was 13, 14 years old when I read it for the first time, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good book, but obviously I didn't enjoy it enough to, remember it 5 years later. And I actually, even like a few years ago after I first read it, I still couldn't recall what happened in it. I've been planning to reread it for a long time. I was actually going to reread it last year in 2019, and then I just never ended up getting to it. But this assignment seems like the perfect opportunity to get back to it. So that's what this video is going to be, me reading and reviewing and seeing if any of this comes back up, and then I'm going to talk about what the book is about. Again, I can't remember anything. I don't know anything about this book. I don't know what it's about. I don't even know when it takes place. I'm pretty sure it takes place in like the 1980s or 1990s. I don't really know. I know it first came out in like 1990 something. And a movie came out with these actors and actresses. The movie came out a few years ago, and that was actually the reason I read this book, because I wanted to watch the movie because Emma Watson, there in the middle, love her. I wanted to watch the movie because she was in it, but first I wanted to read the book. And I never actually ended up getting to the movie, so that just means to tell you that literally I got like nothing from this book. But I hope after I finish this, I'm probably going to have a greater appreciation for it. At least I hope I will. And I plan on watching the movie in any way that I can. I'm not going to like do a vlog or anything of like reading this book. I'm just going to read it. This book is literally like less than 200 pages, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but it's like around the 200 page mark, which is like, I haven't read a book this short in literally years, other than like a novella or like a short story, anything like that. So I'm gonna read this book. I'd probably be able to knock it out tonight, but I got some other homework to do. So I'm probably gonna read it tomorrow or the next day, I'm not exactly sure. I hope I like it. I kind of wish I did recall at least a little bit about this story, because I've heard a lot of people say that this is a really good story, but I guess I just read it at a point in my life where I just wasn't concerned all that much with the books that I was reading. So that's what I plan on doing for this assignment, and this is kind of going to be like my official first like booktube video. I hope to do more after this. Hopefully, if you're interested, you might stick around. Who knows? But yeah, that's it. I'll be reading this over the next few days, and I'll tell you what I think about it. Bye! Okay, so it's a few days later. It's actually the 3rd of April now. It is 11 o'clock at night. I ended up getting really busy all of a sudden. I had a lot of stuff to do, a lot of homework, a lot of things to worry about. But I finally sat down and I started reading The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I just finished the first part a few minutes ago, and I can kind of already see why I forgot about this book. And the main reason is because I was too young to read it. Again, I mentioned earlier that I read this book for the first time when I was either 13 or 14, and Charlie in this book, who's the main character, who's writing these notes or these letters to this friend of his, he is 15 at this point in the book, and he's realizing things from his past, things that have happened, and he's realizing oh, that's what happened, and he's really coming to understand things, and he's 15. And I read this book before I was 15. So of course I didn't know what was going on. But now, as a 19-year-old, just within this these first 40 pages, it's definitely a very impactful story. And I also think it's going to be interesting to see how by the end of the book, whenever I finish it, I'm probably going to finish it tonight. It's not that long. It's only 200 pages. I'm going to see if I can compare how the story impacts me now as a 19-year-old, because essentially I'm kind of in Sam's shoes, Sam and Patrick's shoes, because they're the seniors in high school, and they're 18 years old, they're older, so they definitely know what's going on, and they're definitely aware of all the messed up stuff that Charlie has seen, at least in these first 40 pages. But it's going to be interesting to see how Charlie grows as a character, and maybe possibly compare it to see how I've grown as a person. Because, as I mentioned, I remember nothing about this book, but it makes sense why I remember nothing, because why would I remember these things? Because these are things that I never witnessed, that I wouldn't even think could happen as an innocent 13 or 14-year-old girl. I hadn't even started high school yet, so it's going to be interesting to see how, at the end of the story, if this will proliferate with me, and see how far this is going to go, because already it's whoa, it literally starts like that. There's no question whatsoever that this is definitely a book for teenagers. It's definitely pretty messed up, a lot of the stuff that happens in it. So far we have an abusive relationship, sexual assault and abuse, really there's homophobia to an extent. I mean, not really, it hasn't really happened, but it's there's a character who's afraid to come out and doesn't want people to know that they're gay, or at least interested in other guys, because they're afraid they're going to be bullied. Now, another thing that I found out of reading this story, because I knew that this book was written in the 90s. It was actually published in 1999, but it takes place during 1991. Now, I was born in 2000, so I didn't really know what it was like to see that kind of stuff in the 90s, because I wasn't born in the 90s. But even just from my own personal experience, I didn't know what the word gay meant until I was 12 years old. And that's even kind of late to be learning what it means at some point, or at least at that point in my life, the fact that I didn't learn what it meant until I was 12 years old, whereas some people know what it means, especially now. Some people know what it means from very early on in their life. But anyways, I am definitely interested. I'm gonna keep reading, probably finish the next part, which is, I'm on page 42 currently. The next part is all the way up until page 96. So I'm gonna read until part 3 starts, and then I'll probably update you again on my feelings and what has happened since then. Alright, see you. Okay, I don't think this is very straight, but it's fine. It is, what time is it? It is 12:30, so it's after midnight. And I just finished part 2 of The Perks of Being a Wallflower, so I am just under halfway. There's 4 parts in this book, and then an epilogue, and it actually goes over 200 pages. I didn't know that. I thought it was under 200 pages. I'm kind of upset that I don't remember a lot of this book from the first time that I read it, because I feel like this is a book that probably could have really helped me throughout high school with, like, like going through your first crush and realizing things about yourself and your friend group and your family and all that kind of stuff, because I was a naive idiot when I was a kid. But at the same time, I'm kind of happy I don't remember much about this book, because it's kind of like I'm experiencing it for the first time. In this part, there was that thing that I mentioned earlier. The one thing that I remembered about this book was the Secret Santa thing when Charlie made Sam a mixtape. I was actually wrong. He ended up making the mixtape for Patrick, who is another character. Is this shaking? Patrick is another character, and he is probably my favorite character at this point because, I don't know, I just really like him. I relate to him a lot, for certain reasons. But that's the one thing that I remembered about this book, and it happened super early on, so it's kind of, like, it happened within the first, 60 pages, so it's kind of interesting that that's the one thing that I remember, and it's really early on in the book. Normally things that happen later on in books are things that I remember most vividly. So everything from here on out is basically new territory. I'm trying to see if I can recall certain things, and there are a few little things here and there that I'm kind of like, is that how that went? But I'm not exactly sure. Another thing that happened is I just saw that the Perks of Being a Wallflower movie, which came out a few years ago, has actually been added to Netflix, so I'm finally gonna be able to watch the movie. That was my plan when I first started reading this book years ago, was that I wanted to watch the movie, and then I never did. So I'm pretty sure after I finish this, which will probably be within the next few hours, I'm gonna go watch the movie as well. I don't know if that'll be part of this video or anything, if I'm gonna talk about that. I'm probably just gonna stick to the book. But I really like it, and it's one of those things where the main reason I wish I could remember more about it is if I could compare my feelings towards it now to what my feelings were towards it when I read it years ago, because at that age, 13, 14, I don't feel like I would have appreciated it as much as I appreciate it now, because it is a very real story. It's really impactful. It really talks about growing up and coming out of your naive phase, your naive childhood, and not really understand what's going on, because it talks a lot about family dynamics and abusive sorts of situations, whether in the family or otherwise. Also, because of when this book takes place, there are certain things that are talked about that are still relevant to this day, which is really interesting. There are some references that are made in this book, pop culture references that they talk about, such as music and movies and songs and all that kind of stuff, that aren't necessarily super relevant today, but there's certain artists in there like the Eagles and the Beatles and Fleetwood Mac that are always going to be relevant. They're always going to be relevant no matter what. So I think that's a really interesting thing about this book. I am interested to see where it's gonna go, because it is kind of just a kid who is going through his first year of high school, and he's just learning things about himself, about his family, about his friends, and just the world around him. And there is one thing that I think happens in this book, but again, I'm not sure if I remember it as well, so I'm gonna continue reading. I think part 3 is the shortest part in the book, on page 98, and it goes until page 139, so I'll probably finish that and then check back in very soon, and then I'll read part 4 and then the epilogue, and then I'll be done, and then we'll have a full thought session about what I thought of it and the impact and all that kind of stuff. But it is a very interesting story, and I kind of wish that I went back and reread it a little bit earlier than this, maybe a year or two ago, because I feel like it would have been a lot more timely, but it is what it is. But I will see you later. Bye. Okay, so I just finished part 3 of The Perks of Being a Wallflower. It is the shortest part in this book. It's literally just over 40 pages, and this is the part of the book that is probably the most impactful, or at least it was to me when I was reading it. because so much happened in such a short period of time. It's literally insane. It takes place over the course of like 3 or 4 months, and it's just so much happened. And I was kind of right. I said earlier that there were a few things that I thought I remembered about this book, but I wasn't sure, and I was kind of right. I just remembered it not exactly how it was. All I knew was that Sam ended up getting mad at Charlie for something, but I couldn't remember what it was, and then I read the scene of what happened, and I was like, yep, I know why I remember that now, or at least I remembered her getting mad at him, because what the heck. But it was a very interesting part. I almost forgot to actually stop reading to record this because I just wanted to continue. I am now have about 70 pages left, so I don't even think I'm going to do a like update after part 4. I think I'm just gonna go right into the epilogue and then finish off the book, and then I'll do my final thoughts and finally be able to talk about this book after years of not reading it. I am happy that that I never unhauled this book, because my little bookshelf I have over here, you can't see it very well, but I have my little bookshelf over here, and I couldn't find a book that could fit next to A Little Life right here, except for this book, except for The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So I was gonna unhaul this book actually, because I bought it a few years ago and I was planning on rereading it, but I was like, I don't really know if I would consider it like a favorite or anything, so I'm probably just gonna get rid of it. And I'm really happy that I didn't, because this is one that I feel like I will come back on and reread it multiple times, as I will with, or as I have with a lot of the books on this shelf, and how this book, even though it took me a long time to get back to it, I'm happy that I did. But I don't really have much else to say about this part, mostly because I'm just so excited to continue. But after I finish the book, I will update you on all my thoughts and feelings and what I thought of it, and if I thought it was a good book or not. I'm pretty sure I already have like an idea of if I thought it was a good book or not, but anyways, I will see you later. Okay, so it's currently 3 a.m. and I just finished The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky for the second time in my life. And even though I don't remember much about reading it the first time, I am so happy that I reread it. Synopsis. What is this book about? How do you even describe a book like this? The Perks of Being a Wallflower is a book about a young boy named Charlie. He is 15 and he's going into his first year of high school. And he is a wallflower. He's a kid who doesn't really have many friends. He doesn't really talk that much. He isn't really interested in all that many things. He doesn't really play sports. He's just kind of like an out there kid. And by going through high school, he ends up meeting some friends, Sam and Patrick, and a few other people, but those are the two main people. He also comes from a family he has an older brother and an older sister. His older brother just went into college, and his older sister is a senior in the same high school, and his parents are obviously, like, he has a mom and a dad. His dad works at an office, and it doesn't really ever really go into much about what his mother does, but that's kind of his life, and his life seems kind of normal. He just kind of has, like, he reads a lot, and he likes to write, and he likes just being himself and just listening to music and all those sorts of things. And the story kind of covers from his first day of high school until going into his second year of high school. And the way that the book is structured is that he is writing these letters to a friend, and he's basically just talking about what happened in this year, his first year of high school. So it's really interesting to talk about, and this is a book that's very popular, and obviously there's a movie that came out a few years ago, and a lot of people like know about it and love this book. It's like a cult classic hit at this point. It's very popular, and I understand why. Considering how short it is, being only a little bit over 200 pages, and considering it came out in the late 90s, the fact that it is still something that people often talk about, even today in 2019, 20 years later, it just proves that this book has a very good story and longevity, and it's very pertinent, especially for teenagers going through high school. Now, I'm not in high school anymore. I graduated a year ago, but I feel like now that I have graduated, this book probably came around at a good time, since like hearing what like he's going through in high school, I can very much, even though I can't relate to really any of the stories that he goes through with like going on his first date and like what to do and people that he has crushes on, all that kind of stuff. Like I can relate on like a few levels with that thing, but most of the stuff that's happening like I can't personally relate to, and I still ended up loving this book. But I also think it's very important for teenagers and people, especially people going through high school. This is a very important kind of story to read because it introduces new topics and things that, frankly, people don't really like talking about. And this book is very blunt in some places where it just tells you straight up what's going on. It doesn't really like try and skirt around it. It just goes straight in, and some people will be like, "Oh, that's too much. I don't like that." But for a teenager, especially a teenager in a school where they don't necessarily fit in, I think it's very important to that kind of person. I read this book in one night. I started reading at I think like 11 or something, and as I mentioned, it's 3 in the morning now. And I think I'm gonna take a break. I'm probably gonna like go like play video games or something, but I'm probably gonna watch the movie because that's the reason that I started reading the book for the first time back when I was a young child like 5 years ago. But I don't think I'm gonna watch it tonight. I think I need a little bit of a break, but I am excited to watch it, and I'm happy that I reread this. I'm kind of upset that I don't remember much about the book from when I read it the first time years ago, but at the same time, I'm happy because I was able to experience pretty much everything that happened in the story for the first time over again. There were only a few tiny plot details that I remembered. Specifically, there was one thing that was revealed at the end of the story, that the first time that this character was introduced, this Aunt Helen character, I remembered something went on with her, like, by the end of the story, and I kind of, like, had an idea of what it was, and I ended up being right by the end of the story. But that's basically it. That's basically the only plot detail I remember. I don't really remember much about anything that happened, any of, like, the like relationships that happened or any of like the character development or even the siblings. I actually forgot that Charlie had 2 siblings. I honestly thought he was an only child. But I also understand why I forgot it, because when I read this for the first time when I was 13, 14 years old, these things were not pertinent to me. I wasn't even in high school, and these were things that I had never even like heard of, like certain terms. Like there's just a lot of things in here that happen that I just wasn't even aware of. Even though things like sex and relationships and rape and molestation, all kind of stuff were introduced, like I knew what it was when I was at that age, I didn't really know what it was, if that makes sense. I don't think that this book would be considered like a favorite of mine, at least at this point in my life. There's a lot of other books that have impacted me a lot more, but it is a really important read, and I would definitely recommend it for people that are going through high school or people that are just trying or that can like relate to this sort of character, just someone who doesn't necessarily fit in at their school or even at their workplace or in that sort of thing. Age type of thing, I'd say you probably shouldn't read this before the age of like 14. And it's probably the most important or most pertinent to read when you are a teenager, but this is also something that I feel like adults could also enjoy. Adults could probably read this book and they'd probably really relate to it, especially people that might have grown up during this time period, during the 90s and all that kind of stuff. So like there's a lot of references that are made, like pop culture references, that people might be able to like be like, hey, I remember that book, I remember that movie, I remember that like album, all that kind of stuff. A lot of these things have kind of like they've written their course where they kind of like reach the end of their course now, and it's like these things aren't super relevant anymore, but there was like a few things in here that I saw, that I read, that I was like, hey, I've seen that movie, hey, I know that book, hey, I know that artist. Like, there's a few things, but a lot of it is kind of like moved on. But it's still a book that I feel like, even if you don't understand all the pop culture references, it's still really important, and the message is really important by the end, to just be yourself and do it. Do things for yourself and do things to make yourself happy, not just to appease everyone else. And I think that's a very important message. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video review. This is going to be a mess, but let me know if you liked it. I'll probably do more things like this in the future. I've been planning on going back and rereading a lot of books that I read in the past. There's a lot of books that I read in middle school, specifically for school, that I remember very well, and I don't know why. So when the libraries end up opening back up, I think I'm going to go and check out a bunch of those books and reread them and, try and figure out why I remember them. So if you're interested in seeing that, let me know. But that'll be it for me. I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.